Hey guys, it's your girl Alicia, aka Geek XX Chic, and we are here with a review for the latest episode of Loki, which was called Lamentis. This episode was about finally learning about Sylvie, aka Lady Loki, one of the variants, and more of what her plan was, although, interestingly, we actually didn't learn much about it. She was very tight-lipped, and unlike her variant counterpart, she didn't feel the need to kind of spin off into a long, drawn-out spiel about what her purpose was or what the objectives were or any of those good things. She basically was like, I have a plan, I need to get through with it, and I really don't care what you are all about. But as we saw in the beginning, I thought one of the most interesting things we saw is like we got the inside view of what happens when she taps the minds of some of those people. And as she explained there at the end of the episode, I think most of the people were kind of like what we saw in the grocery store in the last episode, where she could just use them as puppets and speak through them. And then there was other ones like that poor TVA agent who she had to create a whole scenario out of her memories to build trust with her so that she would let her into her mind. And so now we know that what the other agent said was true, that she really was super strong minded, I should say. But we, again, understood a little bit more about how Sylvie's powers work. And I think I said in the last episode that both Lokis have very similar powers in the sense of both of them have to do with illusions, right? The difference with Sylvie's is that hers is more of a tactile getting in your head and creating an illusion, whereas Loki's is much more about the external world, right? He can project illusions, he can create things that we can see and potentially believe, but he doesn't necessarily need to touch you or even be in the same room as you to make that happen. And then I just remembered too, because I was kind of like, but does Loki do anything like that? But I forgot that in, yes, Thor 3, that he touched onto the Valkyrie's mind and he was able to see all of her memories, or her last memories that she had of, her battle against somebody. Anyways, but you get my point. He actually was able to get into her mind and see her memories. So it's not the same as what that Sylvie does, but it's similar in that Loki can somewhat get into a head. He just doesn't necessarily know how to control it, which I think is something he absolutely could learn to do. And the fact that Sylvie said, no, girl, I taught myself how to do that, it's like, Loki was obviously impressed because he did have a teacher, and I think he probably expanded somewhat on the type of magic that Frigga probably taught him, but still, it was interesting to see that commonality between them. I also love throughout the whole episode, the whole banter between the two of them. They find each other equally annoying, which I think is great. And you saw like some similarities in the fact that they can be very stubborn and very unilateral in their purpose. But you also saw some marked differences. One of the biggest ones being that Sylvie is, I guess you could say, more focused than Loki is. Loki does get easily distracted, as we saw with him getting drunk on the train. He's hedonistic, as he puts it. And she's like, yeah, girl, like I get down, I can party too, but not when we're doing something serious. And again, I think this comes down to whatever their backstories are, which again, we got so little on Sylvie's outside of the fact that her mother died very early in life. And it doesn't seem like she had the same privileged life that Loki was afforded at Asgard. It just makes me wonder a little bit more about like what her variant life was like. But it seems like it was one that had a lot more tough scrapes and hard knocks per se than Loki's did. And I think Loki's starting to understand that a bit more, because while I'm sure on some level he knows he's been super privileged, I don't think he ever thought there would be a situation where his variants would not be in the same level of privilege as he is, which is why he was so shocked when he suggested working with her. And she was like, no, like I'm good. So I think that was kind of interesting to see that banter. I mean, it seemed very light, in the sense of Loki being like, oh, like, let's just get to know each other. Let's just find out more about, what your childhood was like, what your mother was like, what you like to do, what's your plan. Like, it seemed very surface, but honestly, you've got two characters who, once again, are very similar in that they both do not trust anybody. They have very little trust in many people. And as a result, they also know that each other are very crafty and very deceptive. So they're both kind of poking at each other, trying to figure out where each other's weaknesses are. And very interestingly, her magic doesn't work on Loki. And I think the reason, personally, I mean, he said it's because I'm strong-minded, which is probably part of it. But I also think it's because their magic, while different, I feel like it's sourced the same way because both of their magic manifests as green. So I think it's in the same frequency, if that makes sense, even though it manifests slightly different. And that's why probably Loki's magic doesn't necessarily work on her. However, he was able to hide the 10-pack and she wasn't able to see where he was hiding it, where I feel like the way that he was able to break, or not even break, but resist her magic versus the fact that she couldn't see his illusion, I think is very interesting. But again, she also kept saying, which I think is super important in this episode, that I'm not a variant, or I'm not a variant. I'm not you. I'm not you. And I'm still trying to decide whether or not that's because she's saying she's not a variant of Loki's, or because it's just her saying that I'm not like, every other Loki that's out there. So I'm not sure yet. I think that part's still purposefully gray at this point. But if she isn't a variant of Loki, then she would have learned that magic, like completely learned it from scratch, meaning she didn't already have an innate magical ability, which is different than Loki, who I believe probably already had some innate magic in him. So that might be why his magic works on her, but not the other way around. We'll have to see. But all of that aside, we didn't, as I said, I kind of really hoped we were going to get more information about what her overall plan was outside of overthrowing the TVA. But as I said, it would make her and Loki very similar if it was just, let me get to the time lizards, kill the time lizards, open up the timeline chaos and move on. But I'm inclined to think that Sophie is a deeper thinker. I'm assuming that her plan is way more layered than what she's letting on. Like, she's being very guarded about her plan, which is very, very smart on her part, because at this point, she really doesn't know if Loki is working with the TVA or not. I don't think Loki knows if he's working with the TVA or not at this point. It's very important, and I get why she's being very guarded about how much she tells him. I do think she wants to trust him, though. I think that small moment on the train where he talked about his mom, and you could see that all of the facades and the mischievousness and all that kind of fell away while he was talking about someone he genuinely loved. You could tell that Sylvie connected on that level with him, but they both, like I said, they're both very distrustful people, and distrustful people just assume that everybody else is distrustful. And so, both of them still have a big wall up, but I think that they do have a bond at this point, and that we're going to see at the very least that Loki is not going to be so keen on seeing her destroyed, at least not yet. But as far as this whole thing about getting off the planet, obviously we know that they don't die on Lamentis. My guess is that Mobius is going to find them because he's figured out what Loki figured out, which is that they hide in apocalypses, right? And so I'm pretty sure that's my guess, is they're going to get pulled out by Mobius at the last moment, or that he's going to at least grab Loki. But I'm just trying to figure out what would happen if he grabbed them both. I don't think that the timekeepers would even want to kill Sylvie right off the bat, because we heard what the leader chick, Gugu's character, said last episode, where she said that the timekeepers were worried, like Sylvie had them worried for the first time ever. So I don't think they would just want to erase her. I feel like they've got questions, or if anything, they'd want to get her working for them. Which brings me into the biggest reveal, I think, or one of the biggest reveals in this episode, which is that all the people at the TVA were not created by the Time Lizards. They were actually brought in as variants. This is very interesting. This also explains a lot of what Mobius is trying to do with Loki. Maybe, just maybe, this is the way it's always been. Like, this is how the TVA's worked, is that they've just manipulated these folks into grabbing variants, using them for some sort of purpose, and then brainwashing them into believing that they've always been part of the TVA. Like, that is a much more dark and nefarious plot, but like I said earlier, it makes so much sense, because I was like, if they have the power to just create a whole human with a personality and with a backstory, how do they not know the end of the world? How do they not have the power to just make everything work? Like, how do they not be, like, how are they not able to just snatch Sylvie from wherever she is and just make her cease to exist if this is the kind of power they have? Because they don't have it. But we saw that with Sylvie, with enough mining, she was actually able to get into the previous memories of that agent. But then I also have questions like, maybe that agent knew that she had a life on Earth before, but just was given the option by the TVA to basically be immortal and live in the TVA and get to do all this stuff as long as she, like, you know, didn't say anything about her past and just got to live. I mean, it's a pretty sweet deal, right? If she'd stayed on Earth, she probably would have died hundreds of years ago. But if someone came to you, Time Lizard, and was like, hey, I noticed you're a variant. We could kill you, or you could choose to join us. In exchange, you get to live forever, and you just have to pretend that you've been here your whole life. Okay, sure, right? Like, a lot of people would take that if that was the option that they were given. So, but if they were forced into this, if the TVA, or not the TVA, but if the Time Lizards and potentially, I can't think it's just the Time Lizards though. It's got to be somebody else. They must have found they must have a group that's in charge of all the brainwashing. But if they just forced a bunch of variants into becoming these lifelong servants of the TVA, that sucks. Maybe that's what Lady Loki's true objective is to free all these poor agents and anybody else from being forced into this life. Because when I saw that scene at the beginning, I almost thought, well, maybe she was a TVA agent that went rogue, but maybe she was. Maybe she still was. We don't know. Like, yeah, she faked the memory with that agent, but maybe she actually was a TVA agent. Or maybe the TVA tried to recruit her and couldn't because her mind was too strong, and then tried to erase her and she like escaped or something. And now she's like, no, this is wrong. Let me stop it from happening. I don't know. It opened a lot of doors is my point. Like, I could keep going on this tangent, but I've already talked enough about it. But that would make more sense as to why she wants to allow the multiverse to happen and why she wants to prune off the TVA potentially. Because if they are forcing people into a life that they don't want, and again, potentially wherever she came from was something that should have been a long and happy life, but was changed or pruned off by the TVA. Maybe the multiverse is supposed to exist. Yeah, there's a lot more going on here now that we're starting to see more of the layers of the TVA being pulled back. I don't know how much more we can possibly delve into, but it really makes me wonder about what Loki is going to do from this point on, because the only other point I wanted to bring up was around the whole love conversation, right? I don't think it was just idle talk just to pass the time. I think this is important for Loki to really think about what love means to him, and that loving someone will give him more purpose outside of all this crazy world domination stuff that he's got going on. I think that could be really what helps him find whatever his compass will be as far as what his new destiny could be. Because my prediction at this point for the rest of the series would be that by the end of it, I think that Loki is going to discover what his purpose is. That once the TVA or the Time Lizards or something, like, my guess is that the TVA is going to be overturned in some way, that like the multiverse is going to become a thing. So if that happens, then Loki's going to be allowed to continue a life. Like, will he be given the option to choose a path? Because now that there won't be one true path, the fact that Loki escaped his death means that he's got a whole new chance to live a new life. But is that life going to be the same path that he took over and over again in the old timeline, or is it going to be a new path? And if so, is it going to be one that's going to be driven by maybe something as altruistic as love versus just power and domination? I might have gotten too deep and philosophical on that one, but I just think that question and his marinating on that question is definitely going to come back in later episodes, and I do hope it's something that we'll see shape Loki for a different path in the second phase of the Marvel movies. Anyways, that's pretty much it, I think, for this episode. Like, again, not a ton happened, but it was really more about that development of character for Loki and for Sylvie, and again, just opening up much more cans of worms as far as how the TVA works. Do you guys have any theories out there as far as what is actually happening here, how the TVA agents got in there? Please leave your comments below. Let's get some theories churning. Nothing too spoilery though for those who have read the comics, but yes, I would love to hear what you guys think. I love getting involved and figuring out what's going on with you guys, and we will definitely see you in the next video. Till next time.